The Master Builder and the Drifting Universes. A calm story about imagination, focus, and learning how to build your inner worlds together with the world around you. Welcome to the Safe Den. The Safe Den is a place for children, young people, and adults who sometimes need somewhere gentle to land. A place where you do not have to be perfect, fast, or strong all the time. A place where you are allowed to be exactly as you are. This story is about Arthur. Arthur is a boy with so many worlds inside him that sometimes he drifts away into thoughts, pictures, sounds, inventions, maps, and stories. In Dreamland, he learns that imagination is not a mistake. It is a tool. And like all powerful tools, it can be used with care, with kindness, and together with others. The Master Builder and the Drifting Universes. There was once a boy named Arthur. Arthur was the kind of boy who almost never had an empty head. Not empty in the way other people sometimes mean it. His thoughts did not simply come and go like little clouds. No, inside Arthur there were whole places, whole worlds. There were skies with 3 sunsets stacked on top of each other. There were islands made of copper trees, hanging bridges and shining cogwheels. There were deep forests where the leaves sounded like paper when the wind touched them. There were great halls with high arches where invisible inventors worked in dark blue light. There were underground railways, moon corridors, engine rooms, castles, bridges, harbours, and hidden doors that could only open if you knew exactly the right sound. Arthur could see it all very clearly, so clearly that sometimes it almost felt as if he was standing there. He could sit in class and hear pencils scratching against paper, a chair creaking a little, and a teacher explaining something important. And at the very same time, inside his mind, he could be halfway up a tower made of amber wood and moon iron, building a bridge between 2 floating islands while tiny bell creatures held the ropes and a flock of windbirds cried at him from the clouds. He could stand in the schoolyard and see other children running around with sticks as swords. Now we fight. I am the knight. I got you. Arthur tried to join in. He really did. But often he stood there with the stick in his hand and thought, yes, but why are we fighting? What kind of world is this? Who lives here? Is the castle old? Are there secret passages? Do the dragons have names? And why is the knight protecting this place? Some children thought Arthur made games too complicated. You think too much, some of them said. It is just a game, said others. We are only supposed to fight a little, said a third. And when they said that, Arthur often grew quiet, because inside him it never felt like just. There was never just a sword. There was a story behind the sword, a city, a forge, an old owner, a promise, a journey, a battle, a map, and maybe a secret. There was never just an island. There was always a harbour, people, a smell of something warm, a light in a window, a sound in the woodwork, stairs, and someone waiting. There was never just a sky. There was always weather, wind direction, colours, birds, sounds, and something hiding right at the edge of what you thought you knew. Arthur did not always know how to explain it. Sometimes he felt so full of imagination that he almost could not fit inside himself. Other times he felt very far away, as if his body was sitting in one place, while the rest of him drifted back and forth between the real world and another world only he could see. It was not always nice. Sometimes the teacher would say, "Arthur, did you hear what I just said?" And Arthur would startle. Because of course he wanted to hear. Of course he wanted to be part of things. Of course he wanted to stay in the real world when someone was talking to him. But his thoughts were like living things. Like tiny builders, tiny machines, tiny inventors, tiny storytellers. They were always busy raising something new inside him. Some days it felt beautiful. Other days it felt messy, and some days it felt lonely. Arthur often wondered if something was wrong with him. Maybe there was something wrong with him, because he could not simply be the way everyone else seemed to be. Maybe he was the only one who heard stories growing behind ordinary sounds. One afternoon, Arthur had one of those days. A day when he had been told to pay attention, listen better, stop drifting away, and also try to play a little more with the others. By the time he came home, he was tired in the way you get tired when both your heart and your head have been working all day. He went to his room. Around him were all the things he loved: small blocks, sheets of paper, sketches, a box of strange screws, smooth stones, an old ruler, a piece of string, A cogwheel, 3 feathers, a flashlight, 2 books about castles, and a box of things that probably did not belong together to anyone else. But Arthur knew they could become something. His room smelled faintly of paper, wood, and the warm air drifting in through the open window. He picked up a small piece of driftwood and ran his fingers over its rough surface. "It is just," he said into the room. Then he stopped. Because it was not just. That was exactly the thing. Inside his head, a whole dock had already begun to form around that little piece of wood. A harbour, a staircase, maybe a lighthouse, a machine that could lift ships out of the water, a bridge with green lamps, a bell that could call the winds home. Arthur sighed. "I just wish I could figure it out," he whispered. "Not lose my worlds, but not disappear into them all the time either." Outside, the wind caught the trees. The curtain moved like a sail. Arthur lay down on his bed with the piece of wood in his hand and looked up at the ceiling. And while the light in the room grew a little softer and the last sounds of the house settled around him, something happened. As it often does in the stories of the safe den, it began with a smell of fresh sawdust, rain on stone, sea air, warm ropes, moss, metal, and a sweet trace of night flowers. Then came a sound, not loud, but clear, a deep, calm sound of something being built far away. Creak, rumble, click, clack, thud, like heavy beams being lifted into place, like giant cogwheels slowly beginning to turn, like wood finding its proper shape. Arthur sat up. On the floor in front of his bed, a path was growing. Not a path of silver this time, a path made of planks, glowing screws, small stones, and soft fields of moss between the boards. A dream path built from both nature and workshop. It wound across the floor and onward into the dark. Above it floated tiny shining drawing pins, feathers, and little pieces of measuring tape, glittering like insects. Arthur stood up. When he placed his foot on the first board, it made a small, deep sound. Thud, as if the path was saying, "Welcome." So Arthur walked. When Arthur arrived, he was not standing in a forest, as so many children before him had done. He was standing on a huge platform, floating above Dreamland. Far below him lay a whole landscape of islands, harbours, bridges, and glittering paths. The sky was dark blue like velvet, alive with stars that seemed larger than normal and hung low like lanterns in the night. The moon was round and golden. Around it floated long veils of pale mist, like transparent sails. Below, Arthur could see some of the known places in the distance. He saw forests where paths curled between the trees. He saw the flash of an owl wing above a treetop. He saw warm islands with soft lights, little harbours and tiny boats. And far beyond them were other islands he did not know yet. Some had towers, some had wheels, some had smoking chimneys, and some had suspension bridges that almost disappeared into the clouds. The platform beneath his feet was built from mighty planks and silver-grey wood, held together by broad brackets of dark metal. Cranes stood with their arms raised toward the sky. Huge cogwheels turned with a deep, friendly hum. Ropes creaked across the floorboards. Here and there small chimneys breathed warm steam that smelled of iron, resin, and night air. Everything sounded alive, the humming, the creaking, the thuds, the clicks. But it was not chaos. It sounded more like a great workshop where every sound had its own place and rhythm. In front of Arthur stood a sign, "Welcome to the building yard between worlds. Here the great imaginers learn to build without disappearing." Arthur read it twice. "That sounds," he said softly, "a little like me." "That is the point," said a deep, calm voice behind him. Arthur turned around. There stood a being he had never seen before. He was as tall as an older child, but broad and strong, as if he had been shaped from wood, canvas, stone, and clouds. His body looked almost like a living toolbox mixed with an old shipyard. On his back he carried tiny scaffolds, hooks, ropes, folded measuring wings, and little wooden frames. His arms were strong and covered in bark-like patterns. His hands were broad, warm, and worn, like the hands of someone who could build houses and still hold something fragile without squeezing too hard. His eyes were amber and calm. On his head he wore a helmet sewn from leather, feathers, and starlit thread. "My name is Bridgehold," the being said. I am the workshop master for the children who can see more than they can always say. Arthur looked at him with wide eyes. Bridgehold, he repeated. Bridgehold nodded. And you, Arthur, are expected. Expected for what? Arthur asked. To learn the difference between drifting away and sailing on purpose. Arthur frowned. I am not trying to disappear. I know, said Bridgehold. Some children do not drift away because they do not want to be part of things. They drift because there is a lot of wind inside them, a lot of sound, many pictures, many connections, many possibilities. Bridgehold looked out over the islands. That can become a gift, but first you must learn to hold an anchor. Arthur did not know why, but those words felt good somewhere inside him. Bridgehold lifted one hand. From a table beside him, he took 3 things. The first was a small anchor stone. It was dark and smooth, with a spiral pattern engraved into it. When your thoughts sail too fast, Bridgehold said, hold this stone and ask yourself, where are my feet right now? The second thing was a pair of listening cups, small round copper cups with soft straps, loose enough to rest around the ears. They do not help you hear more, said Bridgehold. They help you choose what to listen to. Arthur blinked. That sounds important. It is, said Bridgehold. The third thing was a folded sketchbook made of canvas leaves, with empty pages, pockets, and tiny flaps. This is your World Sketchbook, Bridgehold said. It is for your universes. Then you do not always have to carry all of them at once inside your head. Sometimes thoughts become easier to hold when they are allowed to land somewhere. Arthur accepted the 3 things. The anchor stone was a little heavy, in a good way. The listening cups smelled faintly of copper and lavender. The World Sketchbook rustled softly, as if it was already excited to be filled. Come, said Bridgehold, you have 3 tasks to solve, and maybe 4 if you are very much Arthur. Arthur could not help smiling a little. They walked through the workshop city. It was astonishingly beautiful. The floors were made of broad planks that still smelled of pine and resin. Between them, fine lines of copper glimmered like veins in a leaf. Small construction cranes stood like friendly giants with hooks shaped like moons. In open halls, little beings lifted beams into place while singing in short, rhythmic verses. So the work had a beat. Up, lift, turn, hold and raise, see and join. Some of the beings looked like tiny beavers with wings made of parchment. Others were round, dusty night creatures with pockets full of nails and nuts. There were also creatures running on 4 legs, carrying rolls of drawings in their mouths. A few little shimmering figures flew around, painting numbers and symbols on crates with thin, glowing brushstrokes. Everything around Arthur felt like a place where his own head might make sense. At the edge of a great platform overlooking the sea, another figure was waiting. Arthur gasped softly. It was Swallow, the old, light, almost floating being from another story. Swallow looked as if she had been woven from wind, feather down, nightlight, and the finest feathers of birds that only exist in dreams. Her eyes were clear and kind. Her movements were so light that one almost thought she was floating instead of standing. You know the air, Arthur said. Swallow smiled. And you almost know it too, she said. But tonight we are not going to fly. Tonight we are going to learn how to hover without losing direction. In front of them hung 3 great bells under an arch made of driftwood and metal. Beneath the bells stood 3 children, or perhaps dream versions of children, and each of them was doing something different. One girl sat deeply absorbed in a book, as if the whole world disappeared when she read. Another child sorted tiny stones and beads into patterns with such care that even the moonlight seemed to lean closer to watch. The third child, a boy, stood drumming a rhythm on a tree stump so the air around him almost jumped. Look, said Swallow, they are builders too, only in different ways. Arthur watched for a long time. But they are doing something completely different from me, he said. Yes, said Swallow, and yet they are also building worlds. Some build with calm, some build with order, some build with rhythm, some build with words, others build with pictures, some build with their bodies, some build with imagination. Arthur looked down. I just feel so often that other people are easier. Swallow shook her head gently. Easier is not the same as truer. Many children look quiet on the outside and have storms inside. Many look simple, but carry deep worlds you cannot see at first glance. Swallow pointed to the bells. Your first task is to listen. To what? Arthur asked. To difference, without measuring it. Arthur put on the listening cups. At once the sounds changed. He could hear the reading girl's breathing become calmer. He could hear how each turned page carried her into something safe. He could hear the small click, clack, click of the sorting child, and how the patterns almost sang with order. He could hear the drumming boy's rhythm like a heart that knew exactly how to hold something together inside. And suddenly Arthur understood something. The others were not just surfaces. The one who was only reading might be traveling far. The one who was only sorting might be creating peace. The one who was only drumming might be holding the world together in sound. Arthur took the listening cups off. They have worlds too, he said. Swallow nodded. Yes, not yours, but theirs. Arthur felt something loosen a little in his chest. The next task waited in the Hall of Storytellers. It was a round room built from pale wood, blue glass windows, and curved ceiling beams that creaked calmly whenever the wind touched them. Creak, tick, rumble. It almost sounded as if the hall itself was thinking. Inside the hall were long tables covered with miniature worlds, small cities, islands, bridges, harbors, forests, machines. Some were simple, others were wild and full of tiny details. In the middle of the room stood a great figure Arthur recognized from a glimpse in earlier adventures. Holdfast. Holdfast was mighty and still, a being made of wood, earth, stone, and old safety. He looked like something that could carry an entire house on his shoulders and at the same time lift a bird's nest without disturbing it. His eyes were deep and gentle. Arthur, said Holdfast, in a calm voice that sounded like old doors opening in a safe house. Hold fast, Arthur said back, and immediately felt a little more solid. You have many worlds, said Holdfast, but sometimes there are so many that they tumble over one another. Arthur nodded. Yes. He knew exactly what that felt like. Holdfast placed one large hand on the table. Your second task is to build one world to the end. Arthur looked surprised. Only one? Yes, said Holdfast. Not 10 at once, not 20 loose beginnings. One world that is allowed to land. It was harder than Arthur had expected. As soon as he began the first model, an island with a lighthouse, a harbor, and a machine that could pull boats out of the water, 7 other ideas arrived at once. A hanging bridge, an underground tunnel, a sky railway, a machine turtle, a bell tower, a floating crane, a secret staircase. Arthur started reaching for everything at the same time. Then he felt something in his pocket. The anchor stone. He took it out and placed it in his hand. It was cool, clear, and heavy. Where are my feet right now? He remembered. He breathed. Okay, he said to himself, right now I am building the harbor. So Arthur built the harbor. He found the right pieces of wood. He set the upright posts first. He laid the planks across them. He built a little bridge. He placed the lighthouse beside it. He gave the machine a proper place where it could pull boats out of the water. And while he built, something happened. All the heavy, great things that had felt overwhelming before began to find a rhythm. He could hear the materials. Thud when a post found its hole, crack when a crossbeam settled into place, rumble when the cogwheel fitted where it belonged, clack when the small chain slid over the wheel, whoom when the crane moved. There was strength in it. You could almost feel the weight of the big things, the heavy beams, the large wheels, the deep foundations. And still it became lighter for Arthur, not because the work did not require anything, but because for a while his hands and his head were working in the same place. It was as if all the busy movement inside him became one great team of helpers, pulling in the same direction. Holdfast watched him and nodded slowly. There, said the great being, a true master builder does not build less than others. He learns to gather what is big. Arthur looked at the finished model. It was not his whole inner world, but it was a real piece of it. And that felt good. The third task waited at the edge of the sea. There, an island hovered in the air, not quite finished yet. It tilted slightly, as if it was waiting for its final shape. Below it hung chains, bridges, and ropes. Beams stuck out from its sides like ribs. Half of it looked like a shipyard. Half of it looked like a dream. "That is the in-between island," said Bridgehold. "Why is it called that?" Arthur asked. "Because it is built by children who live between worlds," said Bridgehold, "between thought and reality, between imagination and focus, between what they see inside and what others can see outside." Arthur stepped closer. On the island, other children were working. A curly-haired girl drew windpaths in the sand, so little sails could later follow them. A boy built a wall of stones, and every stone had a symbol that matched the others like a pattern. A child with red ears sat writing small stories about who would live in the houses before the roofs had even been built. Another child tested which bells should hang where so the island could have its own sound. "They are building together," Arthur said. "Yes," said Bridgehold, "and now you will too." Arthur hesitated. "But what if I take up too much space? What if I have too many ideas?" Bridgehold smiled. "Then you must learn the last thing. Building with others is not about making yourself smaller. It is about making room." Arthur walked over to the group. At first it was difficult, because immediately he had 20 ideas. Bridges, lifting cranes, hidden passages, star windows, undersea rooms, light rails, sound tubes, slides, steam machines. He wanted to say all of them at once. But then he remembered the listening cups. He put them on. Now he could hear the others more clearly. The curly-haired girl said the wind needed to be able to sing between the houses. The stone boy wanted the square to feel safe and solid. The story child wanted to know who lived where and why. The bell child was thinking about how the island should sound in the morning and in the evening. And Arthur discovered something important again. The others were not superficial. They were simply working on different parts of the same thing Arthur wanted too. He took the listening cups off. "I think," he said slowly, "I can build the connections between all of it." They looked at him. "How?" asked the girl. Arthur pointed. "If the wind needs to sing, we can build narrow sound arches between the towers. If the square needs to feel safe, we can lay the heavy stones in the heart of the island as a foundation. If someone is going to live here, there should be little roads and courtyards and stairs and light in the windows. And if the island needs to sound different in the morning and in the evening, we can hang the bells at different heights, so the wind wakes them in different ways." The others became completely still. Then the bell child said, "That is actually brilliant." Arthur blushed a little. Together they all began, and now the work became big. Really big. They lifted long beams into place. They pulled ropes through the beams. They raised great sails that would become sound screens. They pushed wheels, rolled stones, hung bells, measured with string, and carved patterns into wood. It sounded wonderful. Knock from the heavy beams, rumble from the great lifting wheels, thud, thud from posts being hammered into place, click, clack from metal brackets finding their grip, and whoosh when the sails unfolded, and the sound of many small bodies pulling together and of something finally sliding into place. It required strength. You could see it in their shoulders, in their arms, in their tightened hands, in the way the children leaned into the work. But for Arthur, it was also something else. A lightness. Because the more the island took shape, the more it felt as if his inner universe was no longer racing around without direction. Now it was building. Now it was helping. Now it was finding a place in the world. Arthur felt the wind against his cheeks, the smell of wood, steam, and salt water, the taste of night air on his lips, and a little sweetness from the warm nut cakes one of the creatures carried past on a wooden tray. The cakes tasted of honey, cardamom, and a little smoke from the oven. They ate them sitting on a beam while the moon reflected in the water far below. "I thought," Arthur said after a while, "that the rest of you did not really care about big stories." "We do," said the story child. "We just do it differently." "I also thought some people were more simple," said Arthur. The stone boy shrugged. "I just like it when things fit together. It feels safe." The girl with the wind paths smiled. "And I just like it when something sings." The bell child nodded. "And I like it best when I can hear it." Arthur looked at all of them, and he understood a little more. People can look simple on the outside if you only look quickly. but most people contain much more when you truly meet them. Some build whole universes in pictures, some build in rhythms, some build in systems, some build in words, some build in relationships, some build in sound, some build in movement, and some build in calm. None of those ways were less wise than the others. When the in-between island was finally finished, it was wonderful. It had a wide square of pale stones in the center where you could stand firmly. Small roads went out from it like rays. Between the towers hung sound arches, and when the wind moved between them, they sang with soft, low tones. Along the edges stood tall lampposts with golden lights. There were little workshops with blue windows. There were stairs twisting down toward a round harbor. There were bridges between the houses, secret niches, small balconies, and green gardens in boxes along the edges. And higher up, near the top of the island, stood a large building with a round dome and windows of many colors. "What is that?" Arthur asked. Bridgehold came to stand beside him. "That is the master builder's house." Arthur looked at him. "Is it mine?" "Not only yours," said Bridgehold, "but also yours." Swallow landed lightly on the railing beside them. "From here," she said, "more islands will be built one day." Holdfast stood behind them like a living anchor in the night. "And the best islands," said Holdfast, "are always built by someone who can dream big and still learn to lay the stones one by one." Arthur looked out over Dreamland. Now he could see the connections more clearly. Some of the islands out there had bridges that reminded him of his own thoughts. Some bells had surely been made by children who loved sounds. Some paths had been built by someone who needed calm. Some gardens had been planted by someone who thought in patterns. And maybe, just maybe, a master builder like him had been helping shape some of it for a long time without knowing it. Bridgehold placed a hand on Arthur's shoulder. "The last thing you must learn, Arthur, is this. Your imagination is not a problem that needs to be removed. It is a tool that needs to be learned." Arthur listened. "But tools work best," Bridgehold continued, "when they lie in your hand and not flying all over the room." Arthur laughed a little. "That sounds important." "It is, so when you wake up, remember this. When you drift, use the anchor stone. When everything becomes too much, use your ears wisely. When the universes become too many, draw them down. When you meet others, listen for what they are building. And when you want to create something big, build it part by part." Arthur nodded slowly. He wanted to remember all of it, not just as words, as a way of being in the world, because it made a lot of sense. When morning began to approach, the air changed. The edges of the stars grew a little lighter. The sea under the islands took on a grey-blue pearl color. The wind became softer. Arthur felt that soon he would have to return. He walked through the master builder's house one last time. Inside the great dome were maps of coming islands. On the walls hung tools, models, and drawings. There were long tables with half-finished constructions, small drawers with labels, shelves filled with stones, ropes, bells, cogwheels, glass spheres, and bird feathers. And through the largest window, the whole of Dreamland opened like a living chart of hope, stories, and possibilities. Arthur took out the World Sketchbook. On the first page, he drew the in-between island. Not perfectly, just enough to remember. Bridgehold gave him the anchor stone. Swallow touched his forehead gently with the tip of a feather. Holdfast laid his large, calm hand against Arthur's shoulder. "You are not wrong because you see so much," said Holdfast. "You are not behind because you sometimes drift," said Swallow. "You are a master builder," said Bridgehold. "You simply have to learn when you are building inside and when you are building together with the world." Arthur closed his eyes. He could hear everything one last time. The creak of beams, the rumble of machines, the ringing of bells, the wind through the sound arches, the water far below, footsteps over wood, children's voices, tools against stone, somewhere laughter, somewhere a song. Then the sounds became softer. The smell of wood and sea became the smell of his room. The wind against his cheek became the morning air from the open window. The tone of the sound arches became a faint creak in the house. Arthur opened his eyes. He was lying in his bed. On the table beside him lay his notebook. He sat up at once and opened it. It was completely empty, so he began to draw. A harbour, a tower, a sound wall, a bell, a bridge, the in-between islands. Under the drawing he wrote, "When I drift, where are my feet right now? What should I listen to now? Can I save this idea for later? What are the others building? One step at a time." Then he looked at the words. For the first time, it did not feel as if he had to choose between being Arthur with all the universes and Arthur in the real world. Maybe those two Arthurs could help each other. Maybe he was not the child who simply disappeared. Maybe he was the child who could build. Build stories, build places, build connections, build solutions. Build something others could not yet see. And maybe that was not a small thing at all. Maybe it was one of the special ways to be wise. And if one day you meet a child like Arthur, or if you are a little like Arthur yourself, a child with pictures, stories, inventions, soundtracks, maps, dreams, patterns, and whole universes inside, then remember this. It is not wrong to be full of imagination. It is not wrong to daydream. It is not wrong to think in big worlds. It is not wrong to have trouble fitting into small boxes. Some minds build in silence. Some minds build quickly. Some build in pictures. Some build in words. Some build in systems. Some build in numbers. Some build in feelings. And some build in sound. The world needs all of them. But it is also good to learn how to find your way back, to listen, to land again, to build one thing to the end before building all the others, and to make room for other builders too. Because the greatest universes are rarely made alone. They are made when inner worlds meet the real one, and somewhere in Dreamland, high above the sea, the in-between island now stands and sings in the wind. The sound arches answer the night with soft tones. The beams creak calmly in their joints. The great wheels hum deeply like sleeping giants. And in the master builder's house, drawings are still waiting for more islands. Maybe one of them will be yours one day. Good night. Sleep well. Thank you for visiting the safe den. May your own inner universes be allowed to shine, calmly, warmly, and in your own time.